Hey everybody, it's Kneecap here, and in this video, we have my Retribution Paladin PvE 10.1 guide. Now, there is going to be some, carryover from the 10.07 guide, as I said when I made that, because that was with the rework, and not a ton has changed. But of course, it's a new season, we have new trinkets, we have all kinds of new things to talk about. So it is definitely worth pointing this out, and we just know a little bit more than we knew when the rework came out as well. As normal, for these guides, I try to make them in a way that's for a higher end player, a Mythic Raider, someone who's trying to push a little bit of Rainy in Mythic Plus. But I also try to make it for maybe someone who's just starting out as well. And so I will attempt to not say things like just go sim it for everything. You hear that all the time. I'll try not to do that very much because I don't think that's super effective for people who, maybe are just getting started out or whatever. So I always try to do that. And then also for this video, I think I'm going to say this is how it is for Raid and this is how it is for Mythic Plus. Try to keep it separate and try to keep it a little bit more brief on that in that vein. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get started. The first thing we're going to talk about is the rotation for Retribution Paladin PvE. We're going to talk about an opener, and then we're going to talk about normal priority, and then we're going to talk about AoE priority. So Mythic Plus, Mythic Plus dungeon priority too, basically is the AoE priority. So first we'll start with the Retribution Paladin opener. Now you can see here I am on Wowhead for this particular part of my guide. Why? Because Bolas does an extremely good job at going through and making the API for Paladins and figuring out which abilities go best, and we just have a priority list. It's not necessarily you have to cast this spell, you have to cast this spell. It's more about priority. If something procs, you can press that. Here I have selected Execution Sentence. This is going to be a single target opener. It's very similar for the Final Reckoning in that you basically just press that instead, except for you can build to 5 beforehand instead of pressing Hammer of Wrath afterwards to build to 5. So for this opener, you just go Blade of Justice, Judgment. Doesn't technically matter which one of these you go first with here. Blade of Justice does more damage though, so if they were to come up at this, without a proc, Blade of Justice would be better to come up. Then we're going to go Avenging Wrath. We're at 4 Holy Power. Then we're going to go Execution Sentence. While we're at 4 still, Hammer of Wrath to 5, Templar's Verdict, Wake of Ashes back up to 4, Templar's Verdict, Divine Toll, and then you start going with the priority. So, if not, again, under normal circumstances, pure single target, at that point, you're going to be at 2 Holy Power because we're using Vanguard of Justice, which makes things cost 4 Holy Power. So you're going to be at 2. So then you would use Hammer of Wrath again, and then you would use whatever up was next. Now, there's more to the priority list as we go down. This is just the opener. But you would then, you'd have to use like your Templar Slash, or you'd be generating Holy Power with your Crusader Strike, Auto Attack, or your just regular Crusader Strike as well. So for he is using Crusader Strike, Auto Attack, or Templar Strikes for everything. So that'll be the way in there. If you are using Crusader Strike, Auto Attack, basically you just don't worry too much about this. You're gonna have Holy Power mixed in, and you just want to make sure that you're not overcapping your Holy Power. Basically use the same thing I'm talking about here. Just don't overcap your Holy Power. You're going to be getting random Holy Power spikes from your auto attack. So very similar. Now outside of your opener, obviously Avenging Wrath on cooldown, Execution Sentence on cooldown, Templar's Verdict at 5, Wake of Ashes at 2 or less. That's so you don't overcap. Divine Toll, Hammer of Wrath, very strong. Templar Slash if it's about to expire. What that basically means is don't waste a Templar Slash. If you had to press Templar Strike, if you had to press that because you had nothing else to press, then don't waste the Slash. You do want to use it before it expires. Even if Blade of Justice or Judgment are ready, you do want to use it before it expires because it does do a lot of damage, but not as much as Hammer of Wrath. So you would let it expire to press Hammer of Wrath. Blade of Justice, Judgment, again, these are giving you 2 Holy Power, don't overcap. Templar's Verdict, Templar Strike, and then Judgment. There's a caveat here. If the Judgment debuff isn't up, we're going to have Judgment debuffs up constantly though because of our tier sets. So it makes a big difference. Now for multi-target, and this is going to be more of an AoE, thing here. We have Final Reckoning selected. I do have the tier 34 set selected because eventually you're going to have that, right? All that does is it basically moves Hammer of Wrath a little bit up the priority list. However, in my own testing, I would actually argue with this priority list, and I would maybe have Hammer of Wrath even higher. That's, you know, when I tested on the PTR, that's was my better results, but not by a lot. It's basically like Judgment, Blade of Justice, and Hammer of Wrath are all just extremely similar as far as your damage. As far as priority goes. So again, priority, Avenging Wrath on cooldown, Final Reckoning, when you have 5 Holy Power, hopefully, Divine Storm at 5, Wake of Ashes at 2 or less, Divine Toll, Templar Slash, again, if it's about to expire, Judgment, Blade of Justice, Hammer of Wrath, like I just said, those are all basically the same, and you can even move, if you like the Hammer of Wrath cleave, you can move that up, and honestly, like I said, I didn't see any difference in that. Divine Storm at 4, Templar Strike, and then Judgment being your lowest priority thing if there's no debuff on the target. Now there's almost always going to be a debuff on the target, like I just said. So you know, that's Judgment's a very low priority ability even in multi-target, even though it gives you 2 Holy Power, just because you're pretty much, especially if you're using Hammer of Wrath, it's applying Judgment debuff with our tier set. That's how that works there. I will give a little bit of a demonstration of the opener, I suppose. So we'll go back to the opener here. I won't be able to do it with it on the screen, so we'll just have to you'll just have to remember that what it said there, and you just go Blade into that, into your there, and then Hammer of Wrath, Spender, Ashes, Spender. Now my Divine Toll is going to get up to 5 Holy Power because I'm hitting these other training dummies. So obviously I would have to actually use Spenders in there, making sure I'm cranking out my Hammer of Wrath as you normally would, and then trying also a weak aura for your Divine Toll could be helpful if you don't have the timings down in your head, to make sure that you are trying to get every value out of your Divine Toll that you can. That can be very pertinent as well. And then as soon as you can, you just go back into your regular execution sentence. You don't have your Divine Toll for it, but you do have your Wake, so you always want to put your Wake of Ashes into your second execution sentence. Second execution sentence is obviously going to hit a lot weaker than the first one did. Obviously, I have a Trinket here as well. And it's worth pointing out when we're talking about these openers and whatnot, that with the trinkets, you do, any trinket that can crit, you do want to use it within your wings. I really like this grapnel that I have from the raid because it crits and it's not on the GCD at all, so I can just use it like at any point. It doesn't cost me a GCD, so I can just use it, and it's really nice. So that's pretty much how the rotation goes, and yeah, we'll move on to the next thing. Next up, we'll talk a little bit about the stat weights. Now, for Ret Paladin, stat weights is always a weird one to talk about because stats are fairly equal to us, and they still are even post rework. However, the difference is that they are a little bit jumbled in a different order since pre-rework. So, generally speaking, your best stat is going to be versatility. So, if you just were like, what should I gem my stuff? Versatility. We'll talk about gems later. Versatility should be like the main thing that you're focusing on as far as your best stat. After that, it's kind of Critical Strike and Haste are very, very, very similar, with Critical Strike winning out most of the time. However, my Haste is only 13% right now, and so my Haste value actually is pretty high. What that tells me is that there's probably a very minor breakpoint with something, maybe Execution Sentence. There's probably a very minor breakpoint, nothing huge that you have to hit, maybe around 14 or 15%. And I know there are some Rets that play at like 30% as well, and I almost wonder if there's another minor little breakpoint there. I don't know that for sure, but obviously to know for sure you would have to simulate your character. I'm not telling you to do that. Generally speaking, it's going to be versatility, crit, haste, mastery, right? That's generally going to be your stat order. However, if your haste is super, super low, you know, keep in mind if your haste is like 8%, maybe you should add some more haste. You know, you can't like go, you know, gospel for that. And if I had to just give you a number, if you were a player who's just not going to simulate your character, I would say try to get to 14-15% haste. And I'm guessing your value of your haste is going to start going down once you get to that number. Because I know when I was closer to 20%, my haste value was very, 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 very low. So again, not a huge thing for Ret Paladins with the stat weights, but it is something that comes up a lot. Next, we will talk about talents. Now, to keep this a little bit more brief than previous videos, I'm going to show a single target raid build, and I'm going to show an AoE build. I'll talk a little bit how you can make those hybrid and why it is so cool that Ret can play hybrid now, but I'm only going to stick with 2 builds because otherwise we stay in this section for 10-20 minutes or something. So let's go through the talents here real quick. This is just a very generic raid build. You could change things, of course, like I said, with hybrid and stuff, but this is like kind of just a very generic raid build that you'll see people playing for like many bosses in the raid. When you come over to the paladin side, obviously there's a lot of utility talents. Let's talk about the talents that actually help you do damage. You have your Holy Aegis, obviously your Ret Aura, which you have to have, your Greater Judgment, your Avenging Wrath, Justification. This is a utility talent, but you do want to take your Sanctified Plates. Crusader's Reprieve helps a little bit with damage just because it gives you a little bit of extra range on your melee attacks and your Crusader strikes and whatnot. So it's kind of a damage talent in a way because of that. You could take Punishment again in a raid. It's really not going to help that much though as far as interrupts. There's not a ton of interrupts in raid fights typically. Then of course, basically we skip Divine Purpose and we grab every other damage talent. The choice nodes down here below my camera, it's Seal of Order. So the choices are Fading Light and Seal of Order. You want to take Seal of Order here, obviously of Dusk and Dawn. This choice node, we're taking Divine Resonance, and then of course we're taking all the DPS nodes except for Divine Purpose. We're skipping that, and we'll end up skipping that for AoE as well with this new tier set and stuff. So let's go ahead and move over to the Retribution Paladin side for single target. We have Blade of Justice, and I can try to link these import strings into the description as well. Blade of Justice, Divine Storm, of course. Let's go with the choice nodes. Swift Justice. Why Swift Justice, right? Reduces the cooldown of Judgment by 2 seconds and Crusader Strike by 2 seconds. Well, because we can get Blade of Justice reset with Art of War, so we don't care so much about that one being a shorter cooldown. Whereas Judgment, that there's no reset on that, so we're just trying to lower that cooldown. Exburg, just for extra, fire damage there. And then we have Holy Blade. Blade of Justice generates 2 holy power. Final Verdict. I like Guided Prayer here. In my opinion, it's kind of like a little mini cooldown to keep you alive. It's not nothing huge, but if your health drops down, I like it a lot. Art of War, again, kind of for the same reason. Like Art of War, we're getting a reset, and here we're getting our Judgment, lower cooldown. Jurisdiction gives us range, allows us to play like a mid-range ret build. We skip this one. Shield. We're going to take Vanguard's Momentum, single target, of course. It also goes with tier set. Rush of Light gives you a little bit of artificial haste there. Empyrean Legacy, just a free Divine Storm. Obviously, if you can, you want to put that into your execution sentence. Consecrated Blade for most fights. However, if it's a boss that's always moving, you could easily remove Consecrated Blade and pick up something else for just more damage, like Inquisitor's Ire, right? So if you're on a boss that's moving a lot, you can grab Inquisitor's Ire instead. It actually lines up perfectly with Empyrean Legacy. Extending our wings, Templar Strikes. Crusading Strike auto attack also simulates very similar to it. Like they're pretty well balanced, and depending on your gear and stats, one might beat the other. I like to play Templar Strikes. It feels like I'm in more control. I also don't have to have a swing timer to maximize my play. However, if you are very casual and you want to just play Crusader Strikes and you don't even care about a swing timer, you don't really lose much by doing that. So you can go ahead and do that if you want. Boundless Judgment. Judgment gives you 2 holy power instead of 1. Vanguard of Justice. This makes our abilities just do more damage. Heart of the Crusader. Might here on this node. Abdication. Aegis. Penitence. Why Penitence? Increases the Consecrate damage. Increases the Expurg damage. It increases the execution sentence actual damage. Not the damage that you put into it, but the actual damage of the execution sentence. So Penitence does buff a couple of our abilities there, which makes it a pretty good talent. Blades of Light. Execution sentence. Obviously, it's single target. Wake of Ashes, Arbiter, Executioner's Will, longer execution sentence, Sundering Flames. These talents are just really good. Just kind of Wake of Ashes. You kind of just take that, take all of these for all purposes there. So that's just a very general build and why you play that build. Pretty self-explanatory at this point. If you've gone over any ret stuff at all, it's fairly self-explanatory. The 2 holy power things, why are we trying to take 2 holy power? Mostly because it fits in well with Vanguard of Justice, right? If we weren't playing Vanguard of Justice, I think you'd see different things maybe being played at other places, but this is at least what simulates the best. Let's go ahead and go. So we talked a little bit about, let's talk a little bit about hybrid real quick. So single target build, how would you make this a little bit more hybrid? You could lose something like Heart of the Crusader and take Blessed Champion. You could take something out like Divine Wrath and take 2, and then you'd have 2 stacks of Blessed Champion. There's different things you can do. So, and then the most obvious thing is, so if you're doing a good amount of AoE, but you want to really focus on your single target, one thing you can just do is switch your Final Reckoning from EES. And then you can also then get rid of your Executioner's Will talent, and you can put that somewhere else. So like one thing you could do is you could get rid of Executioner's Will, Heart of the Crusader, and put 2 points into Blessed Champion, for example. And that would be like a mini hybrid, mostly single target build. And that's just like one option that you can do there. Let's go to a full AoE build. So this is like a full AoE. All I care about is my AoE damage. So we're not going to have like any single target stuff taken. Now, this is if literally you were never pressing a single target ability, right? So think of the council fight in the previous raid tier with 4 bosses and you're just AoEing the entire time. There's never really a reason to press single target. Maybe your raid leader calls for you to single target something, but for the most part, you're never really going to do that. In this case, this is going to be the most damage. Yes, we wouldn't even take Vengeful Wrath here on this side in this case, despite all of that. Despite our tier set, you know, powering up our Hammer of Wrath, because you just wouldn't want to use it very much at all. If all you are doing is AoEing, and that's all you care about. And then again, instead of taking Vanguard's Momentum, you take Sanctify. Now, here's the reality though. The reality is with the tier set, and most of the time this is not going to be the case. But if you do care about only AoE, so it's a fortified key or something like that, this is the build for you. So let's just go through a couple of things here. Everything the same on the Paladin side from the single target portion of it. We have Seal of Order down here behind the camera. And then we just have Divine Purpose instead of Vengeful Wrath. For every practical purpose, though, you would want to take Vengeful Wrath because you're going to have a boss to hit and stuff like that. For practical purposes, you would want to take Vengeful Wrath here, especially once you get the tier sets and stuff. So practical purposes, you take Vengeful Wrath. But for full-on AoE, you still take Divine Purpose. And it is close. But I do like this a little bit better. It has much more of a high side. Basically, I would say the average or low side is very close to the Vengeful Wrath, but of course you can high roll Divine Purposes as well. On this side, the only difference is we remove Final Verdict, we remove Jurisdiction, and those are single target talents. Now, again, in maybe a realistic build, you want to have both these things, and you would figure out a way to get them. Here we have Judgment of Justice, just because our Divine Toll hits multiple things, so the Judgment doing more damage is good. Everything else the same here. Here we grab Tempest of Lightbringer, that's more Divine Storm damage. Here we grab Sanctify, that's more Consecration damage instead. Now again, in a practical build, you might want to take Vanguard's Momentum here, because your Hammer of Wrath crits, and it also cleaves with the tier set bonus. So for practical purposes, you might want to take Vanguard's Momentum here, just like you might want to take some single target talents as well. But I am just talking about full-on AoE. Same things here. We take Blade of Vengeance instead of Empyrean Legacy. Vanguard Might still. 2 in Blessed Champion. Empyrean Power. Again, we're very much focused on our Divine Storm damage. Abdication is for the critical strike damage. Here, how we talked about getting rid of Executioner's Will, switching to Final Reckoning. That's exactly what we do. Keep everything the same down here, and then we just go down over here. Talents, so what would you get rid of, right? If you wanted to grab a couple of these single target talents, one thing you can get rid of is Empyrean Power. You don't have to take that. Another thing you can get rid of is your Divine Wrath. You also can technically get rid of your Consecrated Blade and manually cast Consecration if you want. It's very not, nice to yourself to do that, but it is something you can do. You can also get rid of Judgment of Justice if you want, again, to focus on for more of the single target things. So it's a single target build, a full AoE build, and hopefully I sprinkled enough of the hybrid stuff in between to kind of help you guys out. I'll link both these builds. Again, do not use this AoE build as a template and build off of it. You're going to want to take Vengeful Wrath, right? Like you might do more overall on a fortified week without it, but for all practical purposes, you're going to want to take this. So that's it. So we're gonna call it quits on the talents, or else I could go on forever. All right, next up we have crafted gear and embellishments for that crafted gear. So we have some interesting options in season 2 here. So for crafted gear, the number one things that you're gonna see people crafting are things like the lariat, things like Frostfire belt, and things like the weapon. the crafted two-handed weapon, which is also really, really good. And you're going to see people crafting these types of things. Now for embellishments, what you're gonna see is the Frostfire belt and then the Shadow Flame patch. The Shadow Flame patch is new. Basically, do the same amount of damage for the most part, right? Now, if you have the Diurna's Chosen Ring, if you have the mythic version of this, you're continuing to use it for like this entire season 2, right? So the Frostfire belt does help, you know, instigate that ring working too. So it does get a little extra value there. If that's the case, if you do have that. Now, if you aren't using that, it loses a little bit of value. So maybe you want to go with 2 Shadow Flame patch. And those are just an embellishment that you can craft on any piece of gear. So you can make a belt that's not the Frostfire belt, just a regular belt. And then you could put a Shadow Flame patch on it, for example, right? And you could run double Shadow Flame patches. What I'm going to do is I'm going to upgrade my belt, and I'm going to run Frostfire belt with a Shadow Flame patch. Now, it's also worth noting for AoE, it's a little bit different. For the Frostfire belt, for example, is really bad for AoE. The Frostfire leggings are very good for AoE, so like Mythic Plus, right? So having a Frostfire belt and Frostfire legs and being able to swap them off, depending on what content you're doing, can be pretty powerful. Lariat is decent in both scenarios. It got nerfed. It's gonna be stronger as you play more through the season and get sockets on your gear. It's gonna become stronger though. And then just for crafting the weapon is good as well. It's just a crafted weapon. And so your choices there, the crafted weapon versus the Ash Kundir, which I have a heroic version on here. And it's basically similar, right? The crafted weapon you can craft up to, 447 or something like that. And then the mythic weapon is like 450 or something like that. And they're very similar. But if you're not going to have a mythic weapon for a very long time, it might just be better to do that. But it's not better by a lot. But the crafted weapon is really good. Those are the kinds of things that you're going to think about crafting. You can craft any slot, of course. It allows you to put, you know, once you get enough crests and all that kind of stuff, allows you to put the stats that you want on your gear. Crafting is good. But the things that you're going to think about crafting the most are probably the weapon, the Frostfire belt, the legs, the lariat, the Frostfire legs for Mythic Plus, the lariat, and then just other random pieces that you want to put Shadow Flame patch on. And that's kind of where you're thinking about crafting and where you're thinking about embellishments as well. All right, next up, let's talk about the tier sets a little bit. And luckily, I already have my two-piece going on here to kind of demonstrate it maybe a little bit. So basically, our 2 set for Season 2 is very strong. You want to grab that as soon as you can. The 2 set for Season 2 is Judgment and Hammer of Wrath, deal 10% increased damage and 15% increased critical strike damage. Hammer of Wrath applies Judgment. And earlier when I was talking about we have plenty of Judgment debuffs, that's why. Hammer of Wrath is also applying Judgment. It does a ton of damage. It always crits, so the critical strike damage is really good. And so it's just very, very powerful 2-set bonus, and you want to grab this as quick as you can and replace your old 4 set with it, essentially. However, the old 2 set is also quite good. The old 2 set being Judgment, Blade of Justice, and Wake of Ashes damage is increased by 15%. So for the longest time, you might be running 2-piece, as I'm sure I will. However, eventually, if you simulated your character, you would notice that like a mythic level, if you're wearing mythic level tier, when you get mythic level of the new tier from Aberrus, it will, just from the item level, the stats, the strength, the secondaries, the stats will overtake the set bonus being better. So we're going to wear 2-piece until the 4-piece, the 3rd and 4th pieces are high enough item level to overtake the difference in tier sets. And so what that essentially means is if you're a heroic raider, let's say you're at that level, whatever that would equal Mythic Plus wise, if you're a heroic raider, you want to wait till you get a heroic level of the new 4-piece, third and 4th piece to replace your old 2-piece. If you're a normal raider, it'd be the same thing. You'd want to wait till you get that level to replace it. If you're a mythic raider, so I have 415 legs, I want to wait until I get like the 441 legs to replace it, essentially. And that's kind of how it works. Now, maybe you could simulate it yourself. Maybe the heroic is slightly better than it or whatever. But that is something you definitely want to simulate and look into yourself, especially with the upgrade system. Maybe it's better, you can upgrade it up a little bit. But that's generally how it's going to work. So we're 2-piece gamers until our 3rd and 4th pieces are high item level pieces. They will overtake it in that case. That's something you can only find out by simulating, of course. And that, if you're not going to simulate it, you'll just have to trust me, and that's fine. I'm pretty. You can definitely trust me on this, but yeah, that's just kind of how it works. It's a little bit disappointing. That's why you kind of hear me like stumbling a little bit. It's disappointing to be a two piece gamer for a little bit, but that's just kind of the way it is. Eventually, I'll have the new 4-piece on and it'll be great. But for a while, at least for me, since my guild's a more casual guild, I'm going to be a two piece gamer for a little while here. Speaking of things that are a little bit disappointing, let's talk about our ring situation here really quick. Now, in this situation, you're almost better off, not if you want to parse, but you're almost better off if you just didn't play Season 1, because it's a little bit disappointing. So if you have a Mythic Seal of Diurnus Chosen, that's the ring that does fire damage, and if you have your Onyx Amulet from 10.0.7 with your proper stones in it, which is Ice Stone, Desirous Bloodstone, and Twilight Stone, if you have these on there, then these are pretty much your best in slot rings for the entire season. Now, they did say they might nerf, especially the Onyx Amulet, but you're basically looking to replace these with highest item level stuff possible, and even then you would have to sim it to see if it's actually better. So, and this is for single target, as far as the rings go, right? Now, for multi-target, the good news is neither of the rings are that OP for multi-target, so you can actually replace the rings for your Mythic Plus builds and stuff like that. You can, you'd have to simulate to see when it overtook it. Even if you have the Onyx Amulet with the Stormstone on it, you can replace that really quickly for AoE purposes. And you can replace the Seal of Diurnus Chosen pretty quickly too for AoE purposes. Now, to actually simulate it is what you would have to do. However, I would say like heroic rings, for the Onyx Amulet, even lower, like a normal item level ring would probably replace it for AoE. For a Mythic Seal of Diurnus Chosen, probably like maybe a heroic eye level ring would replace that. And you could replace these rings for Mythic Plus for AoE. For single target, you're kind of stuck with them. It's a little bit disappointing, in my opinion. But they have said they're going to nerf the ring maybe like at 10.1.5. It'd be really weird to get nerfed mid-patch for no reason. So I would hope that maybe they would compensate with a buff to Ret Paladin if they nerf the Onyx Amulet. But who knows if they would actually do that. But I would hope that they would do that. But other than that, if you don't have the rings, fine. You don't bother going and farming them. The Onyx Amulet honestly might be worth it for single target. Don't bother trying to farm the Seal of Diurnus Chosen. You can replace that with like a very high-end ring from this new season. And yeah, other than that, but if you do have them like me, you're kind of stuck with them for a while, at least for single target, at least for the raid. I haven't actually got a new ring yet, but I'm looking forward to getting some new rings to at least use the Mythic Plus rings. All right, let's talk a little bit about trinkets now. So we're going to talk about single target. We're going to talk about multi-target like we have the whole video. But first, let's just get out of the way. The best trinket for this entire season is Beacon to the Beyond. This is the best trinket. It's the best trinket for single target. It's the best trinket of AoE. You want to get a hold of these if you can, whether that's like heroic or whatever, however high you can get. Eventually most people can get AOTC. That play really hardcore, but even if you get a normal one, maybe you're a very casual player, this is just the best trinket. You can't go really wrong by having this trinket. Beacon to the Beyond, the best trinket. After that, it gets a little bit more complicated. However, if you wanted to just be really, really generic with it, you could say, a Netherian's Call to Chaos is really good as well in all situations, and single target and AoE. It is actually for sure like the second best AoE trinket after Beacon, and it's pretty high up there on single target as well. There's a lot of things kind of equal in single target though. So the two end bosses, have like the two best trinkets, which kind of makes sense, right? That's a generic way to look at it. Now, if you're looking for some other options though, for AoE, you can go with, now there's actually another really good trinket too. This Ominous Chromatic Essence. Now, this requires multiple people to have this trinket and to be attuned in the correct way with it and stuff. It's kind of a confusing trinket. It probably needs a video of its own, and maybe I'll do that. This also is a very good trinket in all situations, but it does require other people to have it, which makes it a little bit worse. But it is a good trinket to grab and hold on to. And then maybe if you're in a group or something that has it, it can be quite good for you. Other than that, for AoE, you would be looking at maybe like a PvP badge. Like I have my old one from last season somewhere, right here. The Badge of Ferocity. Critical strike, increase your primary stat or whatever on a 1 minute cooldown. That can be decent for AoE as a placeholder until you get one of those really, high end trinkets. And then the Raid Horn from the dungeon. That is from Oldman. Let's go to Mythic Plus. Let's go to Oldman. Where am I not seeing that? And then the Raid Horn. This is actually a pretty decent trinket as well, even for single target. Again, it's one that can kind of be a placeholder until you get one of these really, really good trinkets. The other thing for single target, I would say, is the Grapnel, which is what I'm currently using. This is a very good single target trinket as well. It's just kind of like a weaker version of the other on-use trinkets. That drops from here. And this Zukali Grapnel, that's actually a quite good trinket. Simulates quite good. It has a nice little effect that kind of lets you charge as well, so a little bit of mobility. And this is a great trinket to use as well. So you basically, the general rule is you're looking for main stat with on-use effect. However, the beacon does not have main stat, but it has like an absolutely super powerful on-use effect. So that definitely matters there. So that's what we're looking at as far as trinkets go. Next up, let's talk about enchants and consumables. So enchants first. Sophic Devotion for weapon. We'll just go actually have it written down here. So I'll just read off of this. You can put avoidance on your cloak. That doesn't technically matter. It's not a DPS increase. Waking stats to chest. Avoidance to bracers again. That's not something that helps DPS. You can put shadow clasps on your belt now. That gives you stamina. A fierce armor kit for your legs. Plains Runner's Breeze for your boots, but again, that's not damage. And then Devotion of Versatility for your rings, because versatility is technically our best stat. When it comes to files, you pretty much want to use Tepid Versatility for raiding. There are other files that are good, but this one's always going to be good for like every situation. And then you can use File of Tepid Versatility for Mythic Plus as well. However, there's also the option of using Glacial Fury for Mythic Plus, and that's just basically on you. Like, do you want the survivability of the versatility, or do you just want the raw damage of the Glacial Fury? The damage is not that big a difference, but the Glacial Fury might win out, especially when you're talking about like your overall damage in the dungeon. For our potions, we're going to use Elemental Potions of Power. Nothing's changed there. For runes, you can pretty much use whatever. So for your runes for your weapon, there's Blazing Runes, there's Howling Runes, there's Whetstones, there's Weight Stones. They're all pretty similar. If you really wanted to know, you would have to simulate it. I would suggest maybe using the Blazing Rune, but again, you would have to simulate it to know for sure, because they're all pretty close to each other as far as the raw damage that they provide to you. And then for your food, you want to have a strength food. And then for your gems, you want primary plus verse gem. And then you want verse and crit gems as a very generic rule there. And that just follows along with our stat weights. So pretty simple there. Everything pretty much the same from the 10.07 stuff on the consumables and whatever. Pretty standard. So that's it for this one. Another long ass guide by me. Hopefully it helped you out. Hopefully you can dominate this patch. I'm having really good fun so far. I do expect my damage to go down quite a bit as we do not scale up very well with our gear. But I'm doing high damage now early in prog. So that's kind of fun. So we'll see how that goes. Hopefully you'll have the same experiences, having good time in Mythic Plus as well. And hopefully that continues too, especially once I get some better rings for Mythic Plus. That would be very nice. So yeah, good luck to everybody. Hopefully this helped you out. As always, I do ask you to please subscribe to the channel if you made it through this far. It helps me out a lot. And other than that, everybody, have a good one.